So as you know, Bitcoin has broken all-time high, and this weekly's close could be very interesting. However, what we need to look at now is why is it doing so well? Where can it go? And let's look at the data and the scarcity facts to back it all up. Leave a like if you follow and like Bitcoin, so to speak. And more importantly, let me know, do you think retail will return to this market if it is just Bitcoin running? So on the screen, very simply, we are here. We have gone beyond new all-time highs, and it is a very, very interesting point, the fact that we are at body closures, not wicks now, and weekly structure is looking beautiful. There probably will be a pullback at some point, but it just depends on how high we go first. We're going to look at the zoomed out approach. So if anyone's like, oh, look at you in the comments trying to be Billy Big Bollocks saying, oh, but it's going down a little bit, just be mindful. Zoom out. It's doing really well. But this is the interesting point. The market is slowly getting excited, but not retail. I think personally, we need to talk about the obvious in the room. Institutional-led investing, and this is partly retail as well for obvious reasons, because it's very, very easy as a bit of a blanket to do it, is somewhat getting very feisty, obviously. Now, I know, it's obvious in the room. Money's coming in. The inflows has been really interesting since obviously the 14th of May. Yesterday was a pretty big day. Now, we could talk about other retail FOMO. We got Metaplanet, you got Michael Saylor. Other companies are starting to add Bitcoin to their balance sheet. That's one element to it, right? But the other element is obviously the availability in the US now to buy Bitcoin in this way. And it can create that element of scarcity, supply and demand. And we will talk about it in more detail, so don't go anywhere, because I think that is the most key ingredient. It's like trying to bake a cake without flour or eggs. Pointless. So you'll get the point. The big thing with this is, and it is a bit of an interesting point, the availability in the settlement in cash makes it a really good vehicle that they have to have the Bitcoin to do it. That is key. And another thing that is kind of obvious, we need to talk about it. Global liquidity. The M2, it follows like a magnet, so to speak. So the Bitcoin is following this. Now, money printer, the slow element of quantitative tightening, slowing down, is going to be very, very important. Not to mention the fact of potential rate cuts and that element of, well, the psychological part of, oh, I can spend more money because I can borrow, I can get lower rates, whatever, is better. Primed. Perfect timing, right? Money is starting to return. Risk on is starting to happen. And that's obvious. That's clear and obvious. The S&P 500, the NASDAQ, whatever, it's all bounced nicely since the tariff elements. Not to mention the stable currency dominance. If you follow me on this channel, you'll know that that is coming down. Existing liquidity is going back into market assets, which is huge. Just need one more thing. Quantitative tightening stops completely, and then that could get very, very interesting. Now, I know people in the comments will be like, well, there might be a recession that could be coming, but to be honest with you, everyone's been saying that argument since 2019, pretty much. I could probably argue that. Now, you can talk about macro stress driving somewhat scarcity. We could talk about bonds. We could talk about the debts. We could talk about all that element. But what is and could be happening? We've seen it with gold. Market stress. They thrive in it. Bitcoin is also in the middle. It's not quite like the S&P, but it's not quite like gold. It's kind of in the middle. And it has been performing very, very well under stress. It did better than I expected during the tariff element, right? So we could be talking about this situation where the dollar could be dropping, which it kind of is. We could be talking about risk on assets and people running for potential safety to make money in the likes of Bitcoin, gold. If bonds are bad, if there is elements of fear in the market, that is scarcity. And people want that. Let's also talk about the stock element here. Bitcoin versus big tech, likes of Amazon, the likes of Google, Microsoft, whatever, even their own micro strategy, so to speak. You could argue people may be looking at stuff like this as a way of talking themselves out of buying stocks, going, I might just buy Bitcoin here because it's performed the best. And I know that's going to sound such a dumb statement to say, to buy Bitcoin at all-time high. And I know it's mad, but you might actually make more money on Bitcoin than you would with stocks, which sounds baffling. But that's the situation. We go back to the previous point of flight to safety, the fact of stress. Stocks tend to sell in fear. Gold, you could argue maybe Bitcoin feature in terms of the future could well be that situation where it's okay. And that's what makes it interesting. We could, as I say, we talk about all these assets, and obviously Netflix is doing very well. Nvidia has been doing very well. They're all worth a lot of money, but they don't move as much as Bitcoin. That's fact. And something I talked about at the start of the week was stable currency regulation, that it has been passed over to the Senate. This bill could be on-chain USD legitimacy. This could support the entire ecosystem of crypto, and it probably will benefit Bitcoin more than anything because it's the most obvious play. People want the obvious, especially when it's big money, and that could be a winner. So we could talk about legitimization. That's huge, realistically. And you've also got to look at the fact of scarcity in a long-term mindset. Long-term holders are unfazed by this. This is starting to increase, starting to grow. It's good to see that the 10-year hodl is starting to finally get some traction. For obvious reasons, yes, you could argue it started, pretty early, but you can see the percentages are really starting to ramp up here. Realistically, as I said before in previous videos, if you've been around for 5 to 6 to 7 years, less Bitcoin available equals the price will probably go higher due to scarcity. Just makes sense. But the ultimate question is, how high do we go? We don't know. In 10 years, we don't know. But in this cycle, we've got a rough idea. Let's talk about the obvious. If we go to the monthly time frame and we're looking at the prior cycle, and you'll know this through my entire chart. So for me, I have an area from the previous high to the low. And there we are at the 1618 level. This is the area that we've broken out of. For me, as you know, if you've been following my channel, you'll know that this is where I am looking to take a majority of my position out if we start showing signs of weakness in and around this area, right? That for me is my kind of base case in and around that area. If we're going to silly, stupid levels, it's going to be above that point into the $250,000-ish levels. Over there. That's my personal opinion, obviously. That's if global liquidity goes a bit mental and institutional momentum continues, and also we get some sort of situation, catalyst, whatever, where it goes higher. But you have to take profits on the way. And I openly admit this, and I said this on my Patreon yesterday. Feel free to jump in. I took a little bit off the table yesterday because I want to pay for my wedding. I bought the lows. I want to reward myself. And I've done that. I don't have to worry about that in a year's time. Makes sense. But we can go much higher. This is a beast. And we talk about it a lot. And a lot of comments are always in there going, oh, but if I bought Bitcoin, I'd only make X amount. But if you bought a year ago, you'd be laughing right now. You know what I mean? I've 2 years ago, laughing. 3 years, oh my God. This could do a 10x cycle, and a lot of people, in my opinion, would have missed it completely, which is mad. But that's my base case for it. Mental case could go much higher, but you've got to be smart. Please, guys, don't go FOMOing. So let me know in the comments, what do you think? Where do we top? Or is this the top completely? You never know. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe and follow this video here. This might help you with some of my analysis.